Hello and welcome to another edition of Babbling Irons. You have myself, you have Sloth here today. Obviously, no Frankie, so best wishes, mate. Get well soon, and we'll hope to have you back very, 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 very soon. But what a 24 hours, right? Let's take a bit of a breath because I would say probably in the last few hours, things have gone a bit crazy with everything, and it's been some good, there've been some bad, but let's start off with the bad today, and then we'll move on into the good, so we can end on a positive note.
Yeah.
So first off, the never-ending story that is the Jesse Lingard saga is finally over. We can finally put a pin in that horrible pursuit of free windows and say it's finally done. So I don't really want to spend too much time on this. I'd rather get on with what we can get now we've moved on from him. But first off, let's get your thoughts on the whole saga, and how do you feel that it's now over?
Well, I'll only briefly touch on the part that has really angered me, to be honest, and that's just Lingard's content, like his whole conduct in of it, where I totally understand that first up, when he was at Manchester United, it's his boyhood club. He didn't want to try and force a move, or we were led to believe he didn't, because he's a Man United fan. He's born and bred, and he's gone through the academy, and he's come all the way up. Like, yeah, fair enough. Totally understand that. Respectful. But the way he's gone about it since, I just think, what an absolute piece of filth, subhuman filth. I had some, I like, and people will say, "Oh, you'd never turn down a job with an extra 50 grand a week." Well, when you get to a certain level, when you make enough money, and you've been a footballer all your life, he's probably been on, say, 90 grand since he was 22. It doesn't matter if he's invested well and he's got good people around him, which he clearly does not. They're clearly money motivated, so you'd think he'd have made enough money over the course of his career to not really care about 50 or so grand, if what we're told that he wants a move to get into the England squad is true. If that's the case, you want to be playing at the highest standard of football, you want to be playing in Europe, and you want to be a place where that the manager loves you. The manager's going to pick you. And I'm going to leave him my thoughts on Moyes in this situation to one side for a minute. But I just think for Lingard to give Moyes his word, someone who, let's face it, is the only reason he's getting the money he's getting at the moment. Because if he'd not come out on loan to West Ham, he probably would have just rotted in the reserves. And we even at the time, people were saying, "Oh, it's a bit of a gamble," but Moyes trusted him and threw him in the starting lineup, like, in no time. Even if he'd gone somewhere else, would they have thrown him straight in? Would they have backed him immediately? I don't think they would have. So he's given Moyes his word, and immediately his dad's gone out and spoken to someone else, and that tells you all you need to know about. All you need to know about the family and the conduct. Like, I don't want to get too mean on the guy, but if you give your word, after I've just called him, but after you've given someone your word, it should mean something. But it says it all, that he's just gone off and gone to Forest. Now,
I'll give you my word, but as long as you pay me what I think I'm worth. And when you kind of take the idea that, I've said it many times, and that he's effectively had a sabbatical for a year. We know why he stayed at United, but in effect, it's been a sabbatical for a year.
Yeah.
And regardless of how you want to break it down, and the way that it's been oversimplified in the sense of, well, giving him 180 or 200 grand actually equates to a £10 million fee, and it's an irrelevance, because ultimately what players are going to look at when it comes to contract negotiation times are this player is earning X. Don't care that there was no transfer fee. He's earning X and I want now Y.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I feel we've dodged a bullet. There were talks about his disruptions and his attitude at United. Yeah, that's my dog decided to pick up the squeaky toy. So I kind of feel like we've dodged a bullet. And the fact that he does feel like he's done the dirty on Moyes, someone who put a lot of faith in him. But, you know, that's as much time as I'm willing to give Lingard now. I'm as a conversation, I'm done with Lingard. I'd rather focus on now the exciting opportunities that we have in replacing that idea that is Lingard. And one of the names that have come up, we'll touch on in a moment. First, I kind of want to get your view on a couple of players. One of them that I think I know who you are going to say, but if we are looking for that type of mold, one of the players obviously could be Ludovic Blas, who we've talked about many a time. Also, Kamada has recently been also linked, apparently available for around 10 to 15 million euros, which is again is a fantastic deal if that is true. And a player we spoke about ages ago, which would obviously be a long shot. There's also Raspadori, with the guy we're going to speak about later. So again, there's another good link-up play if we were able to arrange a double deal, which I seriously think is not going to happen. But what are your first reactions as to who we should be maybe targeting in that role? If we're looking to that, or maybe to even look closer to home and look at maybe reintroducing Vlasic.
I really like Vlasic. I've managed. People often ask me how I watch so many games, and it's basically just because I've VPN, but also I've got an American base where I can buy a lot of TV networks and use this to get streams. But over the course of lockdown, and I just ended up catching up on loads of games. And one of the things that American TV does is you can store stuff. You can store sports games. You can store all these games. But you would get the most random bits of Russian football. You would get Ukraine games. And you wouldn't get all of them, but every so often you'd get like a game of the division. But Vlasic would come up. And, you know, when he played, I thought, what a good player. Like he puts himself about, he's strong. He's not afraid to do the graft, but he's got a goal in him. And when we were linked with him, I thought, this is a really good move because it came very quickly. But for some reason, we decided to play him on the left. Now, I don't know why that was. It didn't work at Everton. That's why he left Everton. And his whole time out in Russia, he was playing centrally, pretty much. Like it was. So to just bring him back and play him on the left doesn't make sense to me. Especially when Lingard had turned us down. So your player who you're going to play centrally has said no. So you go out and get another player and you don't play him centrally. So it's a bit of a head scratcher for me. I think I'm kind of hoping that he does get game time. However, would I sell him if we could get Kamada and Blas? Yeah, I would.
Would you then use Blas as a alternative on the right wing? Is that how you would manage?
Well, the thing about Blas is that he's, first and foremost, for people who haven't or may not have watched him, he is a really, really good professional. He's happy to play pretty much anywhere the manager puts him. And for Nantes this year, he's played all over the pitch. He's played centre mid, he's played defensive centre mid, he's played right back, he's played right wing back. He has gone all over the pitch, and he's got a bit of pace. He's quite strong. He's 5'10", but on the ball he is absolutely electric. He's great with his feet. He's got goals in him. and he works really hard. Now, the other thing that I think is a real positive with him is that he is captain of Nantes, and now obviously he's not going to come in and take Declan Rice's captaincy, but we need leaders on the pitch, and he is a great commodity to have if you're at 1-1 against Fulham and you're 70 minutes in. If he comes on and he suddenly starts demanding more of everyone, players better step up. Or else he's going to drag the team forward. And as I mentioned, he's got that sort of Lingard style to his play. But in my opinion, I think he's a better player than Lingard. He's shown a lot more over the past few seasons.
He's only 25 as well, isn't he? So again, he's got plenty of room to grow over the next 2 to 3 years as well.
And he's someone that I think, if he's rumoured to be about 15 million euros, and he stayed at Nantes for this extra season, and Nantes won something, but he basically said, I want to stay, like I will stay, but if there's a good offer for me this summer, then I would like to be allowed to leave. And the size of the clubs that Nantes are and the fees that they get, then they know they've got a good player there, but also they're a well-run club, and they're not going to say to him, no, you can't leave. So if we put in an offer of 15 million euros or pounds, I think we probably get him because he'd want to come. And for me, he's worth every penny. I think he's a really good talent, but also a really good figure to have around the dressing room and around the squad. So that's probably the one that excites me the most, and he's who I'd go after. However, while we're talking about Vlasic, I think we are going to struggle to potentially get money for him. And if it's between moving people on for money, I'd look at moving Lanzini on, because I don't think he's been the same player since since this year, since the start of this year. And you've got someone like Blas who can come in and play all these different roles. He's comfortable doing it, and he's very much the player that I think we wanted Lanzini to be. He's really capable. He takes great set pieces, but he's versatile, and he could do that role that people seem to think Lanzini excels at, where he can sit in the midfield. But if we want to sell someone, I'd sell Lanzini. I know he's been linked with Besiktas recently, and I'd go out and get Kamada and Blas, because Blas is versatile. He can play all over, but Kamada, as you mentioned, is an option. And whether I think Frankfurt would deal with us is another matter altogether. But again, he'd probably want to come. Do we have Champions League football? No. But are we a bigger club than Frankfurt? Yeah, 100%. And he doesn't have to live in Frankfurt, which, I mean, I'm not like, I don't want to be mean here, but Frankfurt,
if you've been there, you're not going back. That's basically what you're saying.
if you've been there, you're probably still recoiling is the best way to say. And I'm not going to say too much more on that. But if you're offering him London, and I know people will say London, but if you're offering him London or if you're offering him Frankfurt, nobody in their right mind is choosing Frankfurt.
No. I think what we saw in Europa League is he has very good movement. He's got good pace. It's a term that I quite like. He's one of those players that kind of ghost into positions. He will just crop up. Obviously, the goal he scored at the London Stadium was all about that. It was fantastic movement, just kind of ghosted into the box. There was ball watching from our side, but ultimately, again, he just moved in untracked, because he's that player who kind of drops into pockets, grabs the ball, moves it on, and he's also quick. So again, in transition, he's a player that's very much like a Lingard in the sense of he can cover ground very quickly. I would agree that personally, Lanzini, we were looking at someone to move on. Lanzini would be the first I would look to do so. 29 years old, he's got a 2-year option on his contract. But I would rather go for, say, 2 players that are going to be 25 that can play right wing, and centre midfield between them, than persist with Lanzini, who I don't think ever works in a 2. Physically not strong enough. He's very good at knitting play together, but in the final third, I find him quite ineffective, to be honest. And I think that's what we need to look for. We need players who are more effective in that final third. They have that injection of pace or that ability to make a pass out of nowhere. Obviously, Lanzini had flashes last season. Obviously, the goal against Crystal Palace, we can't forget that was a fantastic goal, but those moments are fleeting and few and far between. And personally, I think, again, we still have currently 3 players we need to try and fit into that one central position. And we already have Fornals, Vlasic and Lanzini. Of the players, I will be selling Lanzini, potentially looking to try and, if anything, we're not going to play Vlasic, get him out at least on loan somewhere for a good fee so we can get him playing and get teams interested to buy him next season if we don't have a long-term future for him. I'd rather do that than, say, lose out completely. Let's get a bit of money for him in a loan deal. And I think, there's opportunities open, but ultimately I think the bigger question is going to be as to what formation are we going to stick with next year. We'll touch on it in a moment, but again, that position of that attacking midfielder could potentially not be something as relevant as a key starting role, because there's every chance that should certain moves transpire, we may actually change our shape completely. So I think we need to be mindful of that. Any player that we bring in for that cam role is going to have to be someone who's going to be happy to operate in a squad and have a kind of squad role, because I think there might be quite a heavy rotation of tactics, much like we had the year we actually qualified for Europa League. We did tend to play a lot of the 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, however you want to term it, and the 3-4-3. We played that with a lot more variation that season than we did this time round, mainly because I think actually the personnel we had couldn't facilitate it. Obviously, I know it was mentioned before that we had the same players, but there were players who had injuries as well. Masuaku not being able to play was a huge difference as well. Again, we just lacked that. We lacked that pace and what you needed to play in that formation. We really did lack in that year, which was last year. So I personally think whoever we bring in is going to have to be comfortable in a squad role, just because of where we could be moving on to. And I think we should probably kind of curb that one there as to, the potential what we can do now. We're not going for Lingard. There's 2 very viable options, both players we've been linked with as well. And, kind of talk as to one of the other latest revelations that have come out as of today. It's a player we've also been linked with before, but Kostic of Frankfurt is another player as we've been linked to previously. Obviously today, it looks like we're escalated those talks to actually push through a deal for Kostic. Obviously, traditionally, he's a left wing back. Obviously, there has been talk today about him as a left winger, but personally, I don't think that's where we will be buying Kostic for. Anyone who watched Frankfurt prior to when they moved Kostic to left wing back would understand that Kostic was less effective in that role and actually was on the verge of being sold due to essentially being precisely that. And then they moved him deeper. A bit like Rom, he's that player that really does excel in transition. He excels in overlapping and being able to essentially either do the overlap or the underlap, depending on the orientation of the kind of the winger. And again, it's a decent price, 15 million euros. So he's 29 years old. So age-wise, arguably not the greatest when we already have a fairly old squad, but we're doing our best to bring that down. So I guess the question really is if we bring in Kostic, is that an indication that we are looking at a complete style change? And are we looking as to maybe adopting the 3-4-3, much as we talked about with Warburton, when we did our conversation on him, as to he played that for all of last season with QPR, so he's very much familiar with that role. So was that a tactical approach to bring in Warburton, and then obviously look at players like Kostic? And what are your thoughts on the kind of Kostic approach and what that can mean for us, kind of stylistically, I guess?
I mean, I do think the worry for me in all of this is our owner and their relationship. And to be honest, like we just mentioned, but someone needs game time and somebody needs to fix the relationship with Frankfurt. So in my opinion, what I do is I would say I potentially go out and try and bid for both, but say, look, we can give you this player on loan. We can give you Vlasic on loan, so you don't need to replace Kamada. No loan fee. We'll pay his wages. Are we good? And, you know, that's idealistic, I know, kind of like.
But you know they'll offer him just a packet of Kristen as the buy-in on the purchase fee.
But I don't see any harm in that.
No.
And particularly if we were to move someone like Lanzini on, you've covered the wages of Vlasic. So, or it's nothing really. But with Kostic, he's a huge upgrade on Masuaku, and I kind of tweeted this earlier that, you know, he's not a left back, he's a left wing back or a left midfielder. Is he gonna deliver great balls into the box and potentially, with a player who we're linked with, create havoc? Yes, he could well do that. However, as I said, consistency was a bit of an issue for him when he first joined. And let's not forget, he's got a very, very good defense, and he's got a very good option to the left, to the right of him in defense in Ndika. So Ndika's been fantastic and offered that cover for Kostic. And with how Frankfurt play, which if we're going to try and play that way, it makes sense. However, it doesn't. We play that way with Cresswell and isn't the same level of player as Ndika.
I think as well, we do have Aguerd now, so that does also lighten. But as I said earlier, that if we do go to 3-4-3, the issue we have is that we don't have three quality centre backs. So the question becomes: does Ben Johnson move inside? Do they think that Cresswell moves inside and Aguerd centre of a three and Zuma on the right? Well, personally, I think it shouldn't be the square pegs. I don't think Johnson or Cresswell should ever be thought of as that. I also said if we're looking to sell Diop and sell him for 20 million, rumours are Ndika is available for 20 million euros. So surely if you're looking at Kostic, you then look at Ndika to get that linkage, and to have someone like Aguerd sitting in the middle of that three. One, that's what a pacey back three that is in it as well. But the fact that Aguerd is probably the most comfortable of the three in terms of his passing, his ability to carry the ball. You all of a sudden have a quick sweeper between two already quick centre-backs. On top of that, you then have a player who can then come out into midfield, can allow the two midfielders that we have in Rice, and we have to assume at this point it's still going to be Souček to split and go wider. Fullbacks can push up, and then you also then can create overloads in midfield because you have a centre-back who can come out into the midfield to kind of help with that kind of build-up, which would be fantastic. But I do feel in our current guys, signing Kostic is great, but there are other issues that need to be rectified in the style change. And I do think that, one, we would need another quality centre-back, someone such as Ndika. I think that would be great for Kostic to have Ndika if we could manage that deal. But I think the biggest fundamental problem will be in midfield, we have two very functional players. Rice has got better with his creation, but we know with the ball. But ultimately, we have a controller in Rice. You then need someone who's a bit more of an orchestrator and a bit more of a creative player. So Souček for me doesn't necessarily fit that mold because we know his passing is not expansive, it's not penetrative. Lanzini, I don't think, can play in a two. So that then leaves, do you look at Fornals? I don't think Fornals will be trusted as an 8 either. So you're then looking at the players that we've been linked with, such as Onana. Not really going to touch on these guys, but again, it's just a stylistic point of us to team. Zelinski also. They're functional players that operate in a good kind of defensive situation. We don't necessarily have a player who's going to orchestrate play. So that's my concern, is if we do get Kostic and we do switch to a 3-4-3, that there's two glaring problems in there. And there's also, again, the thing of, do we readdress our left-hand side? Obviously, we know our right side's not going to get changed. But again, do we address the right-hand side at fullback? So for me, it opens up so many questions. And for me, it's a completely different transfer window we have to kind of switch to get the best out of it. Are there the players in the market? Most certainly there are. But my concern is buying Kostic is buying a player who is incredibly sufficient in a particular style. And it's much like when we talk about Masuaku. You're creating a style of play to suit one player. And does the one outweigh the many? I don't think it does. I think it's a great signing. I'm not going to dispute that it would be a great signing. The concerns are the style change. And if we do go left back, obviously that would say that Moyes has seen enough in Kostic. It would be a brave choice to do that. But maybe, we've seen the likes of Danny Rose go from a winger to a left back. It is possible. If we become more comfortable in possession, we have possession more, then obviously he's going to defend less. So arguably speaking, it's feasible. But there are questions in my mind as to how it would work.
I think my biggest worry with it, and you kind of mentioned that we don't have 3 quality centre-backs, and I would say we do, we just don't have 3 quality fit centre-backs or reliable. Yeah. We have, apart from his injury at the moment, one, who we know who was pretty much injury-free for a few years, until, of course, he joined West Ham. Now,
that's first game as well.
Yeah, that's typical, but is Ogbonna reliable injury-wise? We have no idea. And the reality is he's aging. So it's a very tough one to predict the outcome of. I'd love him to play the whole season. I think he's a fantastic centre-back. And when we're on the pitch, when he's on the pitch, we look so much more secure. However, do I think he'll stay fit for the entire season? Unfortunately, I don't.
I think that's the problem with Ogbonna, isn't it? He has tended to pick up injuries. Granted, he did also do a Mark Noble, play through a hernia and then get an op. So he did that. I think when we bought Font, wasn't it? He played through the pain until we managed to get the replacement. So I've always got huge respect for him for doing that. But again, as you say, do we have 3 quality, fully fit players? I know some people are now going to be saying, well, what about Dawson?
Yeah.
Dawson is a very good player, but he's a very functional defender. If we're looking to be a possession-based team, does he have the capability in which to withstand a press in a back 3 and be able to pick passes under pressure? That's debatable. We do know he has great skill when he's trying to be. He has made some great passes like last year, but again, in a possession-based team under pressure, that's where I think he comes a bit of a cropper in possession.
I think the issue for me is that we don't have good enough centre backs, and I don't mean that as any neglect towards Ogbonna, towards Zuma, towards Aguerd or Dawson. I mean that towards Diop, because let's face it, in a 3, he's just not got the intelligence to play. And we've heard some things from Moyes that he thinks we should be getting more than £20 million for him. And I'm kind of confused by it, because if we've got a replacement lined up, which rumour is we have, that player should be as good as Diop, if not better. Like, my idea is, if my recruitment policy in my brain should be, if you're recruiting someone, they are as good as, if not better than, the option you have. Yeah. And in the market as well, there are plenty of good centre-backs to get. Now, one of those has just been relegated with Metz. You can look at Kiki Kiarte. Mm-hmm. That's a player who is good with both feet, is absolutely massive. He's
6'4", 6'5", I think. Yeah, he's huge.
Can play with both feet, is good on the ball, but a giant as well. Yeah. So, and Metz have just been relegated. This isn't a player who's going to cost you £30 million. This is a player who you're probably going to be able to get for about 15. So if you've sold Diop for 20, you're making £5 million, and he's going to be on lower wages. So it's for me, it's one of those things where I think there needs to be a rejig of the defence for us to play three at the back. And unfortunately, that comes down to the recruitment. Now,
yeah, so that leads me on to this question. So would you, obviously really good question, Toby, and I kind of agree. But is the arrival of Kostic and the potential style change going to affect negatively Soufal's game?
No.
Do you not think, because obviously there was a quote he was saying as well that he said that playing in a free or playing within that role is a lot harder. Obviously he did struggle this year. He is coming back. But do you think that maybe the links to, say, the likes of Merla is an indication that we as a club are maybe looking at Soufal and thinking maybe he doesn't have it in him long term to play that role, and we're maybe looking to, if an offer comes in, move out and bring in, say, Merla, so we can play that role with traditional or known quantities in the wing backs?
If we are, I'd be very confused as to why. We're talking about the player who, when he first came in, when he didn't have a hernia that he played through, was the best right back outside the top four. Let's not get that wrong. He was fantastic in his first season. And his crossing was great. He was a threat. He runs at players, and he will give you 100% every single game. Now, am I saying he's perfect? Am I saying he's Reece James? No, I don't think he is. But I don't understand why on earth we'd replace him at the moment. I think he's easily one of the best right backs outside the top four when fit. However, just like with Souček, just like with every player who we've played through injury, Ogbonna when he had his blip and he had his hernia, these are serious injuries. They impact your performance, and we've seen the impact of that. So I don't understand why people have this mixed nostalgia for players, and they go, oh, well, he's been a great servant for the club. Okay, well, he had a fantastic season in his first season. We got to the semi-final of the Europa League, and Soufal was worse than he was last season, the season before. But we know why. So why is there this selective criticism or decision that, oh, well, he's had a bad season, we have to get rid of him? He didn't even have a bad season, to be fair. We started the season.
Things like his standard that he set in the first year, it's easy to say he did. But again, I think another thing, the way to look at it as well, is that this does potentially open the doors that Ben Johnson moves inside, because there is this tradition now where right backs are moved inside it within a free, fullbacks are moved inside it within a free, because for this overlapping centre back. But also it does open the door to, say, Harrison Ashby as well. If Soufal does struggle, then we've got two young, promising options. So I personally think Soufal will be okay. I think he made a very valid point that it's a very difficult position because you tend to be very much 1v1 all the time. I think a fit Soufal won't struggle. A Soufal that is tired and unfit, granted, I think we could see shades of what we saw last year, where you could see he was struggling. But again, we know there's a hernia problem there. So I would probably say he's more suited than Ben Johnson in that role. Ben Johnson's still quite frankly, still learning the role. Harrison Ashby, I think, is quite natural in that position if he was to play. But I think, the negativity is even in the three and in the two directly in front. I don't think the actual issue will be in the flank. I think the problem for me, as I see it, in this potential change, is down the spine of the team as opposed to in the flanks.
I think there's a very good solution to this problem at Cobham at the moment, who can come in and potentially offer us a homegrown option, player who's 6'3", and if we sold Diop, you probably pay for, but just go out and get Levi Colwill. My favourite has already gone. He's already off. He's already gone. He's living in Amsterdam. He's fine now. But if we go out and get Levi Colwill, then you've got a left back, you've got a left centre back, and you've got someone who can play, who can use with his feet, but also gives you a bit more security at on that left side. And
feels a bit like a Tomori for me as well. That kind of player that is still quite raw. You saw it in the Championship. He had moments of brilliance, some rawness. If he comes to the Premier League, he'll again have that.
Yeah.
But if you get him in a team that's winning and you get momentum and he's playing, his pace again is also another thing that is a great attribute. That confidence starts to build. And I do see some similarities with him with, say, Tomori. And I do think that if Chelsea are willing to let him go and we were to sell Diop, if we were looking at a homegrown player, we were looking for a long term, I think that's a fantastic option. He may look at it and go, well, I'm not going to play much this year, but you sell the vision of Ogbonna is gone next year. We want him to bring you on. He's going to mentor you for this season. And then the following season, also Dawson's gone. So either way, you are our third choice centre-back. And if either of these two don't perform, you're straight in.
We're playing up this year. You've got European football. Like you're probably going to be the centre-back in cup games. Give him some assurances. And I know Moyes doesn't like to do that. But
no, not at all.
Which I get. Like, it's not a criticism, but I think we know Moyes doesn't really feel comfortable doing that. But when you're considering a stylistic change, then make a little compromise. Say, look, we are going to play you in these. We've got so many games this year. Just bend a little bit. You were bending for Lingard, and I don't mean that sounds a bit weird, but like you were.
Well, it pretty much was, to be honest. In the end,
like you can't have this kind of change of approach, but not change yourself in the way you manage and the way you do things. So I do think there's a ton of really great options out there, and £20 million in this market is going to get you a good centre back. So I don't really understand why there's this question mark. Do I think you're going to get the finished article? You can, but you just have to go and get Kiki Kouyate, or you go and you get Ndika. So do I think that's realistic? No, but I think there's a lot of options on the table for us to look at, and we don't have. The only player who I'm worried about playing in that formation is Cresswell. Yeah. And that's not even, I don't even think he'd be that bad, but it's just the lack of pace he has. If Aguerd's not there, then I think we could get seriously exposed.
The Frankfurt game absolutely killed it for me in that, because in both games, I think we look lost in the formation anyway. I don't think Crespo played great in the obviously the Frankfurt game, and the got sent off. I personally I don't see why we would play a 5'7" left back as a left centre back anymore, especially when you have a player like Aguerd, who is far more skilled, I think, on the ball and defensively. Again, if we look at Ndika, he can play any side of the defence. To be honest, he's comfortable both feet.
As well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we have options. We just have to be willing to move for them and be quick. I do agree on Levi Colwill. I did say, I did put out a tweet just going, we're looking to sell Diop. We want someone long term. And I did put obviously up his picture. So I agree. I think he would be a smart move. The only obviously downside again, it's dealing with Chelsea. There will be a push to have a buyback clause, to have either a sell-on clause. But again, I think sometimes you've got to look at it and go, if it's a buyback clause, you set it high so you can get that player. So you're going to make that money back. If you're going to do a sell-on clause, again, you put it on the profit, not on the overall scope of the deal. So there are options. I think we probably covered this quite well, quite comprehensively as to the potential change and so on. So, let's kind of end on something that's going to be quite positive, quite good. Yesterday there was a lot of call about us in the market. There's a lot of been talk of us making phantom bids. But there was a player we were linked to who was claimed was a £50 million player. But as of today, it looks like terms are agreed for around 45 million euros, depending on where you look. But, I've just seen a tweet also recently just saying that all in all, things are all but kind of agreed in terms of the players kind of principally agreed to the contract. We've agreed a fee, so to speak. We're waiting for the green light from Moyes. And he's due to be in London on Monday or Tuesday for the medicals. So by Wednesday next week, you could say, potentially even Tuesday, we're going to have finally, after probably about 2 to 3 years, we're going to have more than 2 options up front. Let's just remind ourselves of that. Almost 2 seasons we've gone without having a centre forward option, and we are potentially about to have one. So first off, how does that make you feel? And then secondly, the terms we've agreed on Scamacca, how do you feel about those as well?
How do I feel? I feel scared. That's probably the word. No, I mean, we've covered my opinions on Scamacca. I think he's fantastic. I think he's
your man crush as well, as we discovered.
5 Italian, covered in tattoos, like just.
You can wear Versace, you can wear a football kit. What a man!
What a bastard, eh? But I think it's a great move because Euro football expert, my friend he's compared. He said he's very like Zlatan in how he plays football. I compared to Arnie, and I think both of those are really good comparisons. And if that tell you he's not like Haller, then who, by the way, before we say anything, I hope he has a really speedy recovery. I hope he gets back out on the football pitch as soon as possible. So yeah, before we go any further,
and make sure everyone, you are checking yourselves. The Haller thing is quite a big thing. We should all check. So let's all be serious for one moment. We should all check. We also put out a tweet the other day as to how to do those checks. I know this is quite a diversion away from it, but it's an important subject. We should all be aware of it. As men, we should check. There is a tweet on our Twitter page as to how to do those checks as well. So yeah, in light of the LA conversation, we all wish him well. Make sure you're all checking. But Scamacca is not LA 2.0.
Yeah, I think as well, one thing that I would say, and I get why Moyes wants Broja. Scamacca is a level above. And I don't mean that in a bad way, nothing against Broja. This is a guy, though, who has scored what's it, 30 goals in over 2 seasons in Serie A, compared to someone who scored 8 goals at Southampton.
6 goals. 6 goals. We got it wrong last week. It was 6 goals.
Sorry. 6 goals at Southampton, and he scored, I think it was 10 at in Holland. So you know, it's, while he's very young and he's 3 years younger than Scamacca, I don't want to be too hard on the guy, but this is someone who's doing it in a top league compared to someone who hasn't quite hit the ground running at Southampton. And it's someone who's 6'5". He's taller than Broja, but is a much better finisher. His overall game in terms of his finishing ability with his head, with his feet, is so much better.
The Milan goal, I always come back to it, but that goal against Milan was just incredible. And even the 3-headed goals from this season were all good headers. Like, a couple of them were absolute. Well, sorry, one of them in particular was absolute bullet header. I think we put it in our thread on Scamacca as well. But you know, you look at Kostic. If we were to get Kostic with Scamacca, then you get very excited, because I saw a tweet earlier just with a picture of Kostic just going, doesn't, just put it in there. Scamacca's somewhere. But it's kind of true. It's all of a sudden, it's a bit like when we had with Andy Carroll. Obviously, he's a completely different player to Andy Carroll, but it's that sense of chaos that it brings to defenders, in that, where is he? And they start to double up. That starts to create spaces. And then all of a sudden you have pockets for someone like Bowen to run in between those gaps when he comes off the wing, to kind of find, those little pockets to kind of header at goal. So it's chaos player, really.
As I said previously as well, his 1 assist last season doesn't really tell the story. He needs to do a little bit better with his back to goal. But again, he's growing, he's developing in that side of his game, and his 1 assist doesn't tell the story. He's very good in the air, and his link-up play is good. So if he's throwing himself at every ball that comes his way, the chances are he's going to create a chance for someone else, and that stat is going to go up.
Yeah, Mancini loves him as well, doesn't he? There's the thing he was talking around. He's basically saying that he has the ability, he has the endeavour, he has the work rate, but now he needs to step up. In fact, challenging him to really go above Sassuolo, to essentially up his game and go up another level. So when you've got someone like Mancini essentially wishing, imploring and begging you to really push on, that's got to be a great kind of puff your chest out moment for someone like Scamacca. But what I will say is, though, I think we probably should cover this first, is I do think going into the season, regardless, Antonio is starting. I think Scamacca will be eased in. I think Antonio's deserved that right to start again. And he's earned that right to lose his spot. That sounds ridiculous to say, but he's earned his right to lose his spot, and Scamacca's going to have to earn his right to take that spot. But it's a very intriguing proposition, the fact that if you, in games, all of a sudden we can go to a 2 up front, and you have one player who isn't, as he likes to say, goes into beast mode and can just run through you. You have another player who's 6'5" you're going to have to try and stop in the air. Now, all of a sudden, you've got, it's not even little and large, because even Antonio is about nearly 6 foot. So it's not little and large as such, but you have 2 players that are so different, but yet can just cause absolute havoc in games if we need to mix it up.
I think it's, we were talking about the stylistic change, but I think when you look at just how much better our options become, if you can throw on a forward after 70 minutes, and that forward could be Antonio, or it could be a 6'5" player who can completely change how you play, then your wingers are going to be looking and thinking, if I can get one cross into the box, there's a good chance we're going to get something. It might just be a corner, but there's a good chance you're going to get something. So
corners for us, when you've got so many players above 6 foot. And I think the great thing is with Scamacca is that you look at him and think, you can just lump it forward. But he's also that player that if you play him in a 2, all of a sudden you can say to Antonio, you're the front man. He's going to drop into those pockets. You don't have to do that work anymore. You just stay there, and he's going to drop. draw defenders out, and you can just run into those spaces. So it's the fact that from the outside, you look at Scamacca and think he's a big man, he's going to be a target man, we're just going to lump balls up to him. But ultimately, actually, he offers so much more because of his link play. He's so good. Like you say, he does need to prove some of his back to goal, kind of holding off defenders. But if you give him a chance, he's got the ability to wiggle away and to play passes. I think, again, one of the threads, one of them, he basically suckered in two players. They both end up clattering each other because he manages to move the ball out the way. And with the outside of his boot, just plays through Boja, who, well, he makes a very poor choice in the game. But it's that kind of player that can create something. As you say, that the one assist does not tell the story as to his overall involvement in the goals and so on. I think he's one of the highest in Serie A for being, in terms of involvement to build up for goals and so on. So he's a great player, good on his feet. He, is more Zlatan and Arnie than he is an Allaire. So I don't really have many concerns. Again, there's going to be a period where he needs to settle. I don't think we should expect too much too soon, because obviously the price is the price, and that does set expectations. But given the right platform, which I think he will do, he really could be a player. What's going to be interesting is to see if we go for a 4-2-3-1 like we had last year, or even a 4-3-3, the player that's going to be doing that lynch and that link between the attack. I do think we would probably need a left-sided player that is more accustomed to doing kind of the Bowen types of movements and kind of runs in behind with Scamacca. But again, it's an interesting proposition because all of a sudden we have options. Antonio, if he plays, he links up well with Benrahma. If you can get a left winger that can link well with Scamacca, it's great. And Bowen is very, very much like Berardi. So that's going to also be something that's going to be quite familiar to him, even though it's a different player. That movement, that kind of player that likes to come in, it's going to be quite familiar, I believe, as well for him. So it's an exciting proposition, and we've moved quickly now after obviously the complications with Broja. But there's one question I want to ask you, is that I always had a hunch that if we brought in Broja, there would be no Scamacca. Obviously, Chelsea are laying it on thick that Broja is not going to be available. Werner's going. But to me, that seems like a political play from Tuchel to say, I want Werner out, I want two strikers in before I'm willing to listen. That's how I take the Chelsea situation. I do think they will happily sell Broja or even loan him. So my question is, do you think if we get Scamacca and Broja becomes available as a loan, and then do you think they will make that move? And then do you think over the course of the season they'll try and negotiate with Chelsea a full-term kind of transfer as well?
I can 100% see that. I think, and a loan is probably, in my opinion, it's what we've probably angled for the whole time. And my only issue with it will be, like with the Tomori loan before, are Chelsea going to say every single time you don't play him, you have to pay us, you have to give us a fee, you have to do this? And Moyes didn't like that. Moyes didn't like that at all. He said no. Now, if he does that for Broja, I'll be very confused, because for me, Scamacca should be head and shoulders above him anyway. Like, he's the better player in my opinion. Has he got as much potential? He's got about the same. I think we're forgetting that there's not, it's 3 years between them. I think it's not a massive amount. And for me, Broja would have to come in and score 12 goals, 14 goals over the course of 2 seasons for me to think, he's going to be that level player. Now, if he's just available on a flat loan, a loan to buy, then 100% take him, because we know he's more his number one target. But again, it makes me concerned about his overall judgment, Moyes. And I think he's a fantastic manager. I think the Lingard situation has called his judgment into question for me, just overall. I always back the team whenever they play, but I don't think it's unfair to criticize that whole saga and his willingness to sacrifice options or the single-minded approach that he had over Lingard. And if he's got the same approach with Broja, then I'll be very concerned about the play you're potentially moving to the side to play Broja, who is very good, but I don't think I don't think he's remotely close or remotely at the level of Scamacca. And to say he is, in my opinion, is a bit disingenuous, because you're looking at a goal scorer who's performed over multiple seasons in a good league in comparison to someone who's had a decent season at Southampton, but hasn't really done much in a decent league elsewhere.
I think we have to look at the two teams as well. Genoa and now Sassuolo. And he's done, obviously, I think it was 12, 13 goals at Genoa, 14 to 16 goals in all comps this year as well. That's Genoa actually were fighting relegation that season. So to get that many goals in a relegation team is, genuinely speaking, is normally seen as pretty impressive. And obviously this season in a team that shipped goals, they also scored quite a few. But again, it was a middling team in Italy, and he's scoring that number of goals. Again, he all kind of goals as well. He doesn't tend to score with his left foot, but that's the only thing I would say is very much like Haller. He doesn't like shooting on that left. But when he shoots, he's largely on target. He did perform over his XG, but I don't think that explains a lot of what I think. That is an oversimplification to say that's unsustainable. He does tend to try and score from, and has scored from, low percentage areas, such as the Milan goal, completely low percentage. So again, scoring that goal looks great because he overperforms on the XG. So again, it's sometimes it's an oversimplification to say, oh, well, it overperforms, it's not sustainable, because it's not necessarily the true picture. But with Scamacca, I think it's one of those deals that we have to take. Broja, as you say, is still a young quantity. I think with Moyes, what we see is that he knows what he knows and he likes what he likes. So once he finds that player, and he's seen Broja, in all honesty, tear us apart in 3 games. That will have stuck in Moyes' head. And that's a player I want, because I don't want them doing that to me again. So I can understand the fixation. I think that's one of the things he does become fixated slightly. Again, it's not a criticism, it's more of an observation. So, it's kind of, you look at it and go, it's a really great deal. And, Toby, thank you for giving us the info here. But again, £30 million. We were told this guy was 50 million.
Yeah.
And we've now bought him for 30 million.
Well,
so you know what?
It's also,
let's put it the board.
That was the price rumored for Broja, 30 million. And again, I don't mean it negatively towards Broja. I probably sound very critical, but when you're talking about £30 million for either of those players, I'm never going to buy Broja. I'm going to buy Scamacca. It's not a fair comparison, in my opinion. You've got a more proven striker. You've got someone who is a lot more proven, which I just said, but you've got a 6'5" player who, he might not be as quick as Broja, but he's still quick.
Yep.
And what's Youngie has just put, I do hope Moyes doesn't back out of the Scamacca. If he waits for Broja and we don't get him, we really are in trouble. And that's kind of my worry, is that I don't really understand the judgment, where if you're putting these two on the same level, I don't get by what metric you're doing that. If it's done it in the Premier League, well, but if he came to West Ham and he scored 6 goals in a season, The fans would be for £30 million. Our fans would be going, "Oh, he's dog shit. Oh, he's this. He's that."
I think LA did about 7-8 goals, and he's still criticised heavily. So
not going to get the same. As soon as you join and you play, if you don't get 10 goals, you're not going to get that same sort of grace period. And you would get that at Southampton. You won't get that at West Ham. It's just the mindset of our fans, but also we're a bigger club than Southampton. I don't mean that disrespectfully.
No. But at the moment we're pushing for more than them. So it's not unfair or disingenuous to say we are pushing for more than they are in currently, but they're having a good window, so let's give them that. But I can't believe I'm going to say this because I am always and am a staunch believer in GSB out, but you've got to credit them for this. We were told 50 million. People were saying just pay the money, just pay the money. They've negotiated a deal which was meant to be 50 million euros at 30 million pounds. Obviously, they're plus add-ons, so it's probably going to add up to about 45 million, maybe, or even 40 million in British sterling. And there is a sell-on for 10%. So again, you have to credit the fact they've taken a 50 million pound player supposedly and bought him for 30.
Yeah.
Sometimes this is why we say an exercise in patience and just saying pay the money is not good business sense. And we have to be fair, and even though we don't agree and don't like the board, we have to, when they do well, credit them, because otherwise it becomes rhetoric and you lose the argument. And that's why people laugh at GSB out, because it becomes rhetoric and just the sense of phantom. This obviously was called a phantom. This phantom has been shown to be real. So when they do good, we have to praise them. When they do bad, rightly call them out.
Yeah.
In this case, they've done a great deal. I feel I've got a bitter taste in my mouth saying that. But again, I think you've got to praise when work is done good. It's got to be praised.
Let's face it, if he comes to the Premier League and he scores 16 goals in his first season or in his second season, if he comes in and he scores 10, he's considered that's a good first season, in my opinion. If he comes in and in his second season he scores 16, he's probably a 50 million pound striker. For a Premier League player to score 16 goals and be that age, he's probably a 50 million pound player. So realistically, you're looking at 10% sell-on clause. If someone like AC Milan came in for him, you're looking at £5 million to Sassuolo, and you're looking at £15 million profit you've made. Mm-hmm. So that's a great deal. But do players who've scored 16 goals tend to go for that kind of money? No, we'd probably be looking for 60 or 70.
Yep.
So
will you be looking to do a deal that essentially Juventus had to pay for Vlahovic? So that's the kind of money you're going to look at, really.
Juventus are probably going to have to pay that in the form of chocolate coins and over the 30
over the next 30 years. So I'll tell you what, one of just really quick ones, because we probably should start wrapping up, but really quick one from Toby. And Youngie, we will answer the question on Zelensky, not the Ukrainian president, tomorrow. There's been so much that's happened in the last 24 hours, we can't cover it all. But we promise you we'll be back tomorrow to talk around the other rumours such as Zelensky. So I promise you we'll be back tomorrow to discuss that. But if we're just going to look at Toby's one, really quick kind of gut feeling as to who else would you buy? Who else would you bring in to get the most out of Scamacca? So if you had to bring someone in, who do you think is the player you're going to bring in to get the most out of him? I think I know who Toby's referring to, so I might say who that is in a moment.
Go on.
So I think Toby's alluding to Raspadori as one of them, because again, that linkage with him at Sassuolo has kind of changed his game to be more of an attacking midfielder and sit off again, work in that Lingard kind of role. He is naturally a striker, so naturally in front of goal, he takes good. Well, he basically takes his chances. He's a good operator in front of goal. So I think that's where Toby's going. You'll probably correct me after, but I think that's where Toby's going. But for yourself, who are you bringing in? Who do you think is to get the most out of Scamacca, or to benefit the most out of Scamacca?
I think the way you probably get the most out of Scamacca is by dealing with that left-hand side. Now, I think if you're gonna try and address it, I think Kostic is going to be good for that. But again, we've got that defensive issue. So in that case, I would look to add pace in the middle of the park, and I do think Kamada would be a great option for that. He'd be a great Kamada T. So yeah, I no, but I think adding a bit of pace in the middle of the park would be a really good option for us. Kamada, in the last year of his contract, a decent fee, 15 million or so. I think that's a really good deal. But I think one thing we've really lacked is that pace on the left-hand side. So I'd probably look at sorting that out and maybe even getting someone like Sarr in, who I know doesn't normally play on the left, but just that option of the pace to bringing off the bench, or try and really utilize running at players and breaking, which we have done with Bowen, but we haven't really been able to do on the left side. You've got lots of options because you could play Benrahma in the middle, and he can pick those passes for Scamacca. He can do that. But I do think adding a bit of pace on that left-hand side is really important. So, and he played there when he played at Rennes. So
yep. No, he was primarily left and right side. He switched between the two. Yeah.
So I think Sarr would be a good one, but I just I'm not going to pick a player. I think Raspadori, I think he's very good, but I think he might be a little bit too lightweight for the Premier League.
So I know who Toby's on about now because he's he's giving me his response, but and I kind of agree. I know where he's going, and I would kind of go with what it is. But I agree, left hand side massively. I'm not considering Kostic as that. I would consider Kostic as the deeper player. So I do think the left wing is that one. Again, you've made a point about pace. So for me, the two that I can think of that would fit that is they're both going to be ambitious. One is Martin Terrier. There's one of the players that I've talked about for a long time and bored people with. And I don't care because I love him. Along with Koopmeiners, they're the two players that I will forever talk around. So I think. And the other one is Gakpo. They both played together with PSV. So there is, again, that knowledge of each other's game. There is that kind of linkage again. So I think if we're looking at the left side, we're looking at pace, we're looking at people who can score, because I think that's, if you have Scamacca, you also want to have those inverted wingers or forwards who can score. And I think, again, someone like Terrier or Gakpo is a pacey, good international options. And I think Terrier has just been given, or is in line for an international honours at some point very soon. I do think that that's the next target. Whether we will have the money or we'll put the money into it, I don't know. I guess another left wing option could even be someone like Dwight McNeil. You know, his pace, I do think he hasn't developed much over the last 2 seasons. So I do have reservations around him. But from a pacey winger perspective, who can just get down the wing and then whip in some really dangerous crosses for someone like Scamacca and even Antonio, for a inexpensive choice, it's not a bad deal. And he also, again, he has that pace that we talk around. So I think it's probably good we wrap it up there. We've got over an hour, and we could probably talk for another hour. So much so that we're back tomorrow to talk around all of the other news, and there's probably going to be more developing news as of tomorrow as well. So, you know, I think today's been a good show, to be honest. You know, ding dong, the witch is gone. No more Lingard, so that's great. Kostic, it's moving along. It's not finalised. We've got to convince him to drop away from Champions League football. So it is something we're going to need to kind of do a hard sell on. But I'm glad we have to hard sell. I think that's a good thing that we have a player that wants to be convinced to sign for us. I think if they then sign, it's precisely that. It's someone who has then been convinced that this is a project. Don't worry, Brenton Diaz is never in my mind. I've said too many times, I think he's a purple patch and that's it. And Fabrizio has just done the here we go for Scamacca. So I think we can say things are there with Scamacca. So that's where we are. We're going to end on Fabrizio's here we go. So I think with that, there's only one more thing for us to say, and that is come on, you Irons. And thanks very much, guys. See you all again tomorrow. We'll keep you updated as when we're going live tomorrow.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Okay, guys, make sure you do it.
Also, yeah, don't forget, guys, the one thing that I always forget about, which I'm going to have to do now, don't forget to follow us on Babbling Irons. If you like the video, like it, subscribe. We will see you all tomorrow. Thanks very much, guys. See you all later.
Yeah.